What's good, guys? It's the novice. I watched the Netflix series You, the second season, just now. How do I? The first season, for people who don't know, is about a massively self-denial, sociopathic, obsessive stalker serial killer. That pretty much sums it up. And who's convinced himself that his obsessions and later on his like his murders are justified because it all starts from a place of being a hopeless romantic, right? But he is not Ted Mosby from How I Met Your Mother. He is not. I was gonna say Anakin from Star Wars. In a way, he is that. But yeah, because Anakin goes dark too. But but Anakin redeems himself. It's not the same thing. He is not Ross Geller pining after Rachel. All of that. Will they? Won't they? Is taken to a really dark level. That sums up the character of Joe, who's the character that the series revolves around. Watching season two, I didn't like it as much as season one at all. Um, but that doesn't mean it's bad. That's how I sum up season two. It actually hooked me by the end. It hooks me back in. The writing, I can't figure out if I like it or if I'm just so invested that I can't see the flaws, or because without getting into spoilers, there are things that repeat themselves in the season. Joe, the main character, played by Ben Badgley, who's the best part of the series, Humphrey from Gospel Girl. He is he the best part? Yeah, he's the best part about the series. Yeah, the character, what he embodies. He's still in self denial. He's still in a place where there are things around him that he uses to make it seem like I'm not the bad guy. I'm just I do what I do. I help out people in need, and at the end of the day, I'm just a good guy who happens to murder people who don't want to love me because they don't love me. It's just, he's a murdering psychopath or sociopath. So someone smart explain the difference. But the point is that his obsessive nature with women, I feel like to be completely like anti PC, it's funny. It's funny to me watching, like, he is so stupid in his self denial that this season, this is why I was saying the writing, even though the character of Joe is my favorite thing about the show, the writing might be the MVP or not. It depends on your impression when you watch it, because the only way that he arguably starts to be truly self-reflective is when something, again, arguably even more uh up the wall bonkers happens in season two. But I don't want to overhype it. That's the problem. So if you haven't watched it, tell me, is near the end. The Something happens near the end. A couple things happen near the end where I think to myself, okay, that's the direction they're going in. On the one hand, the fact that they do that, it's it's one of those things where, what do you do with this guy, the proverbial like boogeyman? You associate. This is based on a book called Hidden Bodies, I believe. This series originally, and if you don't know, in my season one review, I've mentioned books that this reminds me of, stuff that it reminds me of with this. I guess is a theme in literature, especially like female centered literature. sometimes not. Where there's a guy who has an obsession, usually a guy, sometimes a woman, in certain movies, so on, and the obsession goes to sociopathic lengths, to murderous lengths in some cases. Um, I mentioned in my season one review a guy, I forget the guy's name, but he was a soldier who was killing, luring homeless people to his home and killing them in a book called Stone Cold by Robert Swindle. And I read that when I was, I want to say 13 in school, 13, 14, 14. Um, there's stalker, obsessive stalker stuff. Enduring Love, there's a character in that book. That's another book I read in school. Similar, not murdery, but similar mentality. Very like obsessive stalker. Other like exaggerated lengths, like Kilgrave in Jessica Jones season one. For people who haven't seen that show, definitely watch it. I recommend it. Um, where have you been if you haven't seen that show? That's and you know it's funny I mentioned Kilgrave and Jessica Jones because another takeaway that I got from the end of the season is that I like Penn Badgley, who plays Joe in the series, in this role so much as the obsessive self denial, like extreme self denial sociopath. I like him so much in this role that I partly wish he was Kilgrave. Can you imagine like a parallel universe Jessica Jones where he was Kilgrave in season one Jessica Jones? Because obviously David Tennant made it his own. So Kilgrave in the comic, um, originally he was a Daredevil villain before he was Jessica Jones. But from what I've read about Alias, he had a Russian background. So if anything, he should have had maybe like a twang. That's assuming he wouldn't be educated enough to have a to take away that accent. But uh, if anything, David Tennant making him British was him being so good as an actor that that just became associated with the identity of Kilgrave. But imagine if a Badgley, I think I'm mispronouncing his name. Imagine if Penn Badgley as Kilgrave made that his own so much that you thought he was American, which seems like a weird concept because again, I'm talking about fictional characters. But regardless, the point I'm making is that these things need to be explored, um, which comes to my flaws. But the flaw about the season is that it still feels not good enough. Like there's something that's still preachy-ish about this show, especially in season two. Um, and that comes down to this season, season two. They often remind you because of where Joe is, the people he's around, that he's around privilege, and it has a lot to do with like my change in politics, my personal worldviews, and there's a couple of other things. But I feel like that was so, you know what I mean? You don't know what I mean. I'm so tired of like self-flagellating, uh, white, um, uber rich people, like apologizing for themselves. I'm, they even if they don't do it like in exactly like that way, just the environment that Joe's in that happens more often than not. And again, it's there were things about this season that by the end of like overtook that completely. So it didn't bother me and as much as it may have done if the writing didn't overcompensate. But it was still enough for me to talk about it and mention it as a flaw in this review. So yeah, I would prefer a show, especially in fiction, where the writing speaks for itself in terms of like life chances, people getting away with certain things because of their backgrounds. I don't like when people have to self-flagellate. There's a meme I think it's a YouTuber Walter's Ghost who I used to follow. There's a meme I've seen of a guy called Paul Bettany. He's an actor. He plays a Vision in the Marvel movies, and he I believe was in the Da Vinci Code. And there's a meme where the character he plays in the Da Vinci Code is whipping himself. He's like some uber religious um, Christian or Catholic, I'm not sure. and he's like whipping himself like, oh, I'm so sinful, and that's meant to represent in the meme like white guilt. There's a lot of white guilt in this series. There's a lot of white guilt. To me, it's just bad writing, but it's also like it's bad way to encourage self reflection and discussion. Um, I just believe this movie. This movie is obviously this movie. Yeah, you know what? It's so good to me. I'm thinking it as a movie, but this is a TV show, and this TV show is based on an adaptation of something that's explored in women's literature, some literature in men. That proverbial boogeyman. I've mentioned it with Jessica Jones, with some of the books I read in school, Enduring Love. Roberts, the Stone Cold was about homeless people. It wasn't necessarily about that kind of boogeyman, but it was that proverbial boogeyman of like the mastermind kind of. I don't want to say stalker because not all of the examples I used are stalkers. Like the Robert Swindle one, he just lured them in, and then the I keep saying Robert Swindle. That's the author. The Stone Cold, the character in the book Stone Cold, he just killed people, but he lured them into his apartment first, into his flat, um, and killed homeless people because he hated homeless people. But the point I'm trying to make is that this show is clearly meant to represent and talk more about that boogeyman that you associate with these kind of stories. That mastermind stalker, that mastermind sociopath who will come after vulnerable people, women, some men, but usually women. And I feel like when they constantly go on about privilege, even if it's a lot more subtle compared to some other shows, it's a sign of bad writing and lazy thinking, in my opinion, where you just expect people to nod their head along just because someone's apologizing for the fact that they're elitist, and then I don't like it. I don't like it. It could have been better. I have issue with that with black literature. Not black literature, with some black shows I've seen where you have again the equivalent, like there's a proverbial boogeyman. It may be like a certain corrupt cop, white cop, um, something you would associate with like a black detective story, that a novel or a show like season one Black Lightning. Oh, there was a character who he was at the head of like a government agency, and he kept saying the phrase "Make America Great Again." Oh, that shit was so whack to me. I watched the first episode of season two and never went back. Obviously, it's partly to do with the fact that I'm more of a Marvel fan, so if anything, I'm gonna stick with Marvel stuff more to a fault. In the case of like Luke Cage, which also had some issues to me with like lazy storytelling disguised as identity, like woke politics. But yeah, that stuff is a side of like lazy writing. But the writing was good enough in this season to me overall to recommend a watch. I definitely recommend you give this a watch, guys. If you've seen it already, tell me what you think. Again, I didn't like the season. I liked it enough. That's my summer. And Joe is still the highlight. His self denial is like is is never funny. It's not as funny as like Bill Hader playing Barry in the HBO series Barry. That's more explicitly funny. This is just funny, like by accident, like in a very dark way. If you have that politically incorrect humor and you're recognizing that you're just watching fiction instead of taking what I'm saying like as a hurtful statement about women and men who are pursued by obsessive people like this. Obviously, I'm not condoning stuff like that. And if you're someone who's watching and you think that, please don't watch any of my videos because you're in the wrong place. He's a fictional character. Of course, I'm gonna talk about. I may have some dark humor about it. How that's part of how I process this kind of stuff. Please tell me your thoughts down below. If you like this video, check out some of my others. You see a description, like a link anyway. Probably like here or here. And then if you like my videos, yeah, like this one. Subscribe if you like. See you.